All right, today we're talking about something pretty incredible. We're going to explore how one man, Andreas Vesalius, and his single extraordinary book completely blew up our understanding of the human body. He challenged centuries of dogma with a simple but totally radical act. He just decided to look.
So take a look at this. This is the front page, the frontispiece, from Vesalius's 1543 masterpiece, De Humani Corporis Fabrica. And let me tell you, it's not just an illustration. It's basically a manifesto. It shows this chaotic, crowded anatomy lesson, but there's one massive difference from everything that came before. See the guy right in the center, with his hands literally inside the body? That's Vesalius himself. He isn't lecturing from a dusty old textbook, he's demonstrating from reality itself.
You know, this whole scene just captures the very essence of his revolution. And to really get it, we need to understand what exactly he was fighting against. I mean, what made the simple act of a professor actually touching a corpse so groundbreaking? Let's dive in. Okay, so to understand Vesalius, first we've got to understand the world he stepped into. A world where anatomy wasn't taught with a scalpel, but more like with a sermon from on high. For over 1,000 years, one name pretty much ruled medicine: Galen. Now, he was a brilliant Roman physician, but he had one major blind spot. He almost exclusively dissected animals, like monkeys and pigs. And yet his writings were treated like gospel, describing a human body he had never actually explored himself. This total reliance on old texts led to a really bizarre and disconnected way of teaching. So you'd have the lector, that's the professor, sitting way up high, just reading from Galen's work. Down below him, the ostensor would kind of point to the general area being talked about. And then finally, a sector, who was often just a barber surgeon with no real academic training, would do the actual cutting. The brain, the voice, and the hand, they were all completely disconnected. Vesalius thought this whole setup was completely absurd. I mean, his own words just burn with frustration. He saw it as this weird performance where no real learning was happening, just the blind repetition of ancient and, as it turns out, often totally wrong ideas. And you know what? That frustration, it fueled a revolution. Vesalius decided it was time to get down from the pulpit and pick up the scalpel himself. And right here, you can see the difference it made. Vesalius is right in the middle of the action. He combined all three of those roles into one. He was the teacher, the demonstrator, and the dissector. He was absolutely convinced that to truly understand the body, you had to get in there and investigate it for yourself. As a professor in Padua, he took this philosophy and gave it to his students. He actually arranged with a local judge to get a steady supply of bodies from executed criminals, which was a super rare opportunity back then. He insisted that his students stop just listening and start dissecting. He was basically teaching medicine based on hard evidence, not just ancient authority. And the second he started actually looking, the mistakes in Galen's work became, well, glaringly obvious. For instance, Galen, probably looking at a pig's head, claimed the human jaw was made of two bones. Vesalius took one look at a human skull and proved, nope, the mandible is a single bone. He found another big mistake in the chest. Galen said the human breastbone, the sternum, had 7 parts, which, surprise, surprise, is just like the monkeys he was dissecting. Vesalius actually examined a human and counted just 3. It was crystal clear. Galen's anatomy was not human anatomy. And this one is huge. Galen taught that the major blood vessels started in the liver. Vesalius traced them back to their real source, the heart. This one correction laid the essential groundwork for understanding blood circulation decades down the line. We're not talking about just a few little slip-ups here. In total, Vesalius corrected over 300 of Galen's errors. 300! He wasn't just editing the old map of the human body. He was throwing it out completely and drawing a new one from scratch. And he took all of these incredible discoveries and poured them into a single monumental work, a book that would change not just medicine, but art forever. That book was De Humani, Corporis Fabrica, which is Latin for On the Fabric of the Human Body. And get this, it was published when Vesalius was just 28 years old. It was a 7-volume atlas that was as much a masterpiece of art as it was a game changer for science. The book was just jam-packed with over 250 stunningly detailed woodcut prints. The artistic quality was just unlike anything seen before. It's widely believed they actually came from the workshop of the legendary Renaissance master Titian. This was nothing short of a visual revolution. For the first time ever, doctors had a detailed, accurate map of the human body. But it was so much more than that. The figures weren't just sterile clinical diagrams. No, they were posed in these lifelike, almost heroic stances, set against beautiful landscapes. It was a true Renaissance celebration of the human form, and it was all made possible by the latest and greatest in printing technology. But Vesalius's greatest legacy wasn't just about correcting old mistakes. It was about creating a whole new method of scientific thinking that would lead to discovery after discovery. So, in this second edition of the Fabrica, Vesalius questioned a core idea from Galen that blood somehow seeped through invisible pores in the wall dividing the heart. Vesalius admitted he had doubts. Why? Because he couldn't see these pores, so he simply refused to say they existed. This simple act of admitting uncertainty was just as revolutionary as any of his discoveries. And that single expression of doubt just blew the door wide open for others. Just a few years later, one of his students, a guy named Rialdo Colombo, described pulmonary circulation, the idea that blood travels through the lungs to get from one side of the heart to the other. Then, in 1628, William Harvey, who also studied at Padua, finally proved the full circulation of blood. See, Vesalius didn't have the final answer, but he asked the right question that led everyone else to find it. In the end, his whole philosophy can be summed up by his own powerful words. He taught the world that real knowledge doesn't come from repeating what's in a book, but from the experience of your own two hands. He argued that to truly heal the body, you first have to be willing to see it, to touch it, and to understand its magnificent fabric for yourself.